Hey guy, happy new year. It's 2025. I know I haven't made a video in a while. That's mostly because the sim isn't updated. There are some decks I want to try out, but they're in OP09 and EB02. So I'm sort of waiting for the sim to update. So that's why nothing's been happening. I will say something did happen. Robin made it to top 32. There were a few flagships that were running at the start of January. There was one in Orlando, one in I believe Malaysia or Indonesia, and one in Latin America, and that's where MemoBunker got top 32 with Robin. So that's pretty good. That's pretty awesome. You guys know I'm a huge Robin fan, so I just want to take some time to congratulate him. He's probably not going to see his video, but still give him his flowers. Top 32 at a Nats is pretty good, especially with an off-leader meta like Robin. I'm gonna go over the deck list. I sort of did like an interview with him, in that I sent questions to a friend of mine who's a friend of his. So big thank you to Madwell for helping this happen. But I got some questions. I have some questions for him about his deck list, and then he gave me some answers. So we're gonna look at his deck list and just look at his sort of interpretation of this deck list and his mindset. Then I want to go over BY Luffy, that matchup specifically, and then review the game that was actually streamed. Unfortunately, he lost. It was the best of 3, and it went to game 3, so that's pretty good. I personally think he played that game 3 perfectly. It's just the other guy who played BY Luffy, he pulled into like 3 geckos, and like at that point you sort of just lost the game no matter what deck you're playing. Like 3 geckos and 2 sabos, that's a nasty cycle. That's unfortunate. Just I guess a little comment, because I know that there's been a lot of discourse. I'm personally not a competitive player. I'm more of a casual fiend, but I do know that there has been some like talks now about like, oh, ban Gecko. Like I personally don't think Gecko should be banned. He is annoying, but there are ways to deal with them, and it is hard to draw into. Obviously with the EB02 events it'll be easier, but then again you are dedicating more resources into finding that top end, and you might not even hit. Like in a deck like BY Luffy, like most of your cards are yellow, so if you're running that 2-drop events, which I don't think you do in this deck, but let's say you do, like you still have to hit the gecko, right? And that's just less resources to do other stuff, to do your mainline stuff. So I don't think gecko should be banned. He is annoying, but like he's only annoying. I personally don't think it's all that bad as people say. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let's go into the deck list. Let's cut here. There we go. Okay, so before we actually go over the list, my friend Madwell, he just messaged me. Apparently I was saying his username wrong as well. It's a MemoBunker. So this is his list. Let's go through it before we go through the questions. So personally, I think this list is pretty standard. I actually had a similar list at the start of OP09, or when I was like first theorizing. So let's just go over it. So we got 9 Yamatos here, aces, Onamis, and egg Namis. I think this portion is pretty standard. You got your top end, you got your trigger banishes, and even this part here too, the Frankies, Bedges, Olivias, those are pretty standard. It kind of goes a little off with the 3 Robins. Now, I was a little confused at this at first, but now that I think about it, realistically, you're only going to use Robin, like 6 Robin's ability only once. And that's when there are 3 life. And after that, the abilities turn off. It's just a vanilla 6/6. Realistically, you don't need to hit this card as often as you do. Like, the only other time I could realistically see you using 6 Robin twice is if your first hit doesn't go through, and if you pull 2 Robins. So like, if your first hit doesn't go through, like you play 6 Robin, they go down to 4 life, and then you play it again, they go down, or sorry, they go from 4 to 3, and they go from 3 to 2. Like that's the only 2 times you would use it. Or if you Katakuri like one of the cards up to life, and then you banish it the next turn. Both of those scenarios are incredibly rare. Like realistically, you're only going to use 6 Robin only once. So this to me actually makes sense. I actually might make some changes to my deck now that I see this. Actually, also before I give my thoughts over this deck list, I just want to say I did not make it to top 32. That was a MemoBunker. So you know, this is just my opinion. These are my thoughts as a fellow Robin player. Obviously there are people out there who are better than me. I just want to give my thoughts on this list just because I'm a huge fan of Robin, and I'm So happy that she made it to top 32. Anyways, these are where we get into the text, or at least the text in my opinion. We got 4 Gadatsus. In my opinion, I would run only 2 Gadatsus because I want to run more triggers and 2Ks. But 4 makes sense. I think it's dependent on the local meta, honestly. Like if you're in a more aggro meta, you're gonna see more Gadatsus, Sanjis, Namis, those kind of cards. But if your meta is a lot slower, you would see much less of these cards. I'll actually go over the matchup spread a little later, just like before we start the interview. But I just want to go over the deck list first. So we got 4 Gadatsus, 3 Sanjis, 2 of the 0 cost events. This is a 0 cost counter. It's a trash a card to do +3, but the trigger here is pretty good. If you're at 0 life, you basically gain a life and trash a card. So it's very good for like if you're super lucky. We also got 6 blockers here. We got 6 trigger blockers. I'll give my thoughts on this a little later. I personally don't necessarily agree with it, but again, my meta is different and there's different reasons. I think these cards are great in the deck, but just me personally, I wouldn't have them in the deck I run. I'll explain that a little later. 4 Gum Gum Giants. I think a lot of Robins are running with 4 Gum Gum Giants. I actually, before the Egghead package I still run the list that I have in my previous Robin video. I also used to run 4 Gum Gum Giants, so I think this might be a staple. I would say 3 is the most. 4 is a bit overkill for me. In my opinion, you're only running 4 because you're not seeing them enough, so that might be why he's running 4. Because it's a non-counter. It's a non-counter. There's no counter on the side here, and there's no trigger. So it's a very hard card to keep in hand. Like you're only having this card just for the counter effect, and you kind of need to set that up. I will say the Ace and the Gum Giant is a little confusing to me. Obviously, they both have their own situations where they're valuable, but just having them together is very difficult to get value out of both of them at the same time. Likely you'll need to commit to one of these routes, which is why I personally opt for the 9 Luffys in the categories rather than the Aces. That being said, I do run Ace in my list. I just don't run 4. I actually just run 2 Aces and I run 3 Luffys and 2 categories. That's my top end. One of my comments for this list, just now that I look at it as a whole, I think it's a great list for Robin. You have your healing elements, you have your control factors with Nami, Gadatsu, Sanji, and Yamato. And from this list, I could tell that the meta that MemoBunker is in, it's more aggro. So let me actually bring up the matchup spread list. I don't have a screenshot of it, so I'm just gonna leave it on screen. Bang, right there. So let's see his matchups. So we have Shanks, Dofi, Teach, Lucci, Dofi, Pluffy, Lucci, Pluffy, Lucci, Pluffy. And then in top 64, he played against Lucci. And then obviously top 32, he played against Black Yellow Luffy, which he ultimately lost. So again, we got a lot of aggro decks. We got Dofi, we got Luffy. I wouldn't say, like, most of these decks are aggro decks. I'm not sure how the Shanks match, because I know that there's 2 decks for Shanks. There's either a Control Shanks, which I think is the one he's likely playing, at least right now. I don't think many people are running Rush Shanks anymore, so I'm assuming this round 1 Shanks is Control Shanks. So we got Dofi and Pluffy. We got 5 out of 12 matches, so like almost half of the matches were aggro matches. So this list does make sense in that sort of meta, just because your Eggnami, Gadatsu, and Sanjis all take care of tempo. Like if they're playing a shit ton of bodies on board, like these cards take care of that pretty healthily. And you're ramping up to 9 Dawn fast enough for Yamato to pop those cards as well. So this deck makes sense in a very aggro deck. I will say, as a disclaimer, well, it's not really a disclaimer because it's after the fact, but me personally, my local meta is slower, so I'm not too concerned about managing tempo, but I do run Gadatsu at 2 and I run Sanji at 2, just in case I'm going second or just in case I run into an aggro deck, but it's not my focus. My focus is to pop whatever is on board on the next turn, and then the next turn after that just play Yamato and then just pop whatever they put down afterwards. That's sort of my approach with my Robin deck, but again, this is not about me. That's just my comments about this list. Okay, so next I want to actually go over the interview questions, and pardon me for the spelling mistakes. MemoBunker he doesn't speak English. I would have loved to have done like a full like video cam interview. I just don't speak Spanish, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, so these are the questions I had. I only had 4 questions, so let's go through it. So my first question was, what was the core of the deck and what are the must-see cards? So Nico Robin's a leader I tried out since the announcement. Me, I hit my mic by accident. Me too. Me too. Like I Robin's my favorite character. Like once I heard about her, I'm just like, this is my deck. Right now, this is my deck. But I like his response. It's actually nice that we agree here. The strategy is maximizing banish to prevent opponent from gathering resources. I want to highlight gathering resources because this is what I also say. Robin's all about bleeding your opponent's resources and their hand, just so they don't have anything to defend when you put your endgame on board. And it really helps because you're ramping to the end, so your endgame comes faster, right? You don't really, I would say you don't really have a mid game. Like your focus of the entire deck is all endgame. It's hard to get a mid game with Robin because you're trashing cards you're trashing cards / resources to ramp for that end game. I'm personally hoping that there's more mid game support for Robin, but right now she's an end game deck, which is why I don't think she's doing as well as like people hope. Because again, her focus is end game, and she kind of gets shit on by aggro decks. So again, that's why we need to play variations like this that take care of that tempo, so we can stop the bleeding, so we can get to our healing stuff as soon as possible. I have a more control version. Yeah, like this is good control. Nami, Gadatsu, Sanji, and Yamato, those are very good control cards. I personally run the Egghead pack. I run some Egghead, which has Nami, Frankie, and Egg Luffy. Egg Luffy also controls a little, but it's more about that Rayquaza event that lets you summon a 5-drop or less from trash. So it actually lets you summon one of like Nami, Luffy, or even Frankie from trash. So you kind of build your own tempo there. Closer to it, I don't know. Where the best cards get control on the field are Gadatsu's, Nami's, and Yamato. Yeah, so that's what I said. Again, similar, like we both have similar opinions on this. You know, that's a great way to approach Robin. She's a little difficult to play. What I noticed from watching other Robins is that they're very trigger heavy, and this list, I'm not gonna say this list isn't trigger heavy. Like these blockers here tells me it's a trigger deck. I think Robin's much more than a trigger deck. I think once you get into manipulating your opponent to do certain things, like one of the big techs I like to do with Robin is let's say you have a Nami or a Gadatsu on field, right? And you have your leader, and then I don't know, let's say like a big body in hand, right? So if you swing low with the character on board, you're putting your opponent in a position where they're like, you know, like I can take this life, at least it's not getting banished because the leader's still standing. So what's happening there in terms of psychology, right? You're forcing them, because like in any other game, if you swing 5 with Egg Nami or if you swing 6 with Gadatsu, that's like the easiest counter that anyone would do. But because your leader is banished, and because that banish is always going to be a threat, they're almost incentivized to take that life, even though it's a weak swing. And because it's a weak swing, we have all of our Dawn still to play out a big body or to fill out board with blockers or these other cards, or for our event cards, or even our big bodies, right? So the weak swing in Robin decks are actually very good. Another thing I think is also super underrated in Robin deck is choosing not to swing, because again, as like I'm saying this, and MemoBunker is also saying this as well, you want to control their resources. There are times where you want them to take life, and there's times you don't want them to take life. And that's where this ace comes in as well. Before, I wasn't a fan of ace in the deck, but like I noticed that like the body plus life is pretty valuable, and honestly, it doesn't matter if you don't swing, because like let's say Robin, you're not going to have a lot of cards in hand, so you're not going to be able to defend board all that much. At the same time, the cards on board, if they're not tagged with Onami, they're going to be giving cards to your opponent. So again, they're going to be incentivized to take life. So more often than not, I'll actually leave characters standing because this keeps them alive. So they're actually forced to swing into me, giving me resources, and while like sort of draining them of their resources, and it sort of protects my board. And what my game plan with Robin, I don't think MemoBunker mentions it here. I forgot to ask him that. I read the answers and I'm like, damn, I should have asked him for that. But at least my mindset with Robin is my ideal endgame board is just a shit ton of big bodies ready to hit. Right? Like I'll often end the game with 9 Luffy, But when I play that 9 Luffy, there's already like a Yamato, a Katakuri, an Ace on board. Like when I'm ready to finish the game, like that's when I play the 9 Luffy. Because that's just a shit ton of big swings into leader, and it's very hard to defend that, especially when you're draining them of their resources. So manipulating their resources and keeping your card standing protects your cards from being swung into. Because let's say you swing with like Ace, right? Let's say you're at 2 life, you play Ace, so you have 0 Dawn and you're not healing. You're actually choosing to not heal because you want to rush with Ace. So you swing 10k, and then your opponent goes like, let's say 15k, or let's say like 16k into Ace. Yep, you don't have cards in hand unless you have like an event. But like again, there's no Dawn up to use this. Like the best event you can have is this. Like it's likely that you're not going to be able to defend that Ace. So that's why I'll actually opt to just heal and not do anything. Sorry, that's like a bit of a tangent there. I just wanted to get that thought out because I see a lot of Robins sort of relying on triggers and relying on like just aggression. But I think there's value in not swinging. That's a tech I think that's super underrated with Robin. Okay, let's go to the next question. A lot of people seem to be opting for 9 lane instead of 10 ace, mostly because it synergizes better with Gum Gum Giant. I think I mentioned that at the beginning, or it might have been in my first time recording this, but one of the big sort of negatives with running Ace and Gum Giant is because since you're using all 10 Dawn, you're not going to be able to have a Dawn to use for Gum Giant. Unlike a Purple Black Luffy, I know you can't use 10 Ace in it, but like you can't maximize all 10 Dawn if you want to play Gum Giant. But the Purple Black Luffy allows you to do that. That's beside the point. That's why people actually don't like the Ace. But I do see people opting for 9 lane. I personally opt for 9 Luffy, but people opt for 9 lane because it heals, it removes board, and it synergizes better with Gum Giant. So this is his response. So he did test it. The issue here is discarding a card. You're already doing it too much with leader effect to ramp up. Yamato is much better as a top end with Ace in my opinion. So I agree. Again, I would 100% agree with this. I don't like Linlin in this deck. I personally thought Linlin worked well in this deck. I actually bought the alt arts when they were cheap. The issue with 9 lane is you're already dumping cards with leader effect. So you don't want to, so you're already dumping resources that you could possibly have. And 9 lane, in order to use her effect, you need to dump another card, which you don't want to do. What I would say in place is actually run the Katakuri. Because I actually think Katakuri moves an 8 cost or less, whereas 9 lane, I think she only moves a 6 cost or less. So I think Katakuri is much better in that front. And if you want a 9 drop body, I'd suggest 9 Luffy instead, just because you draw a card and it's a rush. 9 lane is not a rush, it's just a heal and board remove. That's my thoughts on 9 lane. Question 3, why are you running 6 trigger blockers? This is a point of contention for me, just because I don't run any blockers in my list. Again, as I said, my local meta is much slower, so I'm not as worried to get aggroed down. And if I happen to run into like a rogue aggro deck, that's why I'm running the Egghead package, where I could possibly play Nami or Luffy from trash and then just pop their board the turn after. So I'm sort of taking care of that tempo. Obviously, I'm not optimized to take care of that tempo, but it's a much slower meta, so I'm not as concerned. Sorry, my sister came in. I'm not sure if she heard her knocking. Anyways, so these blockers are very useful in an aggro meta, just because there is a chance that you develop a blocker that could help stall you until you get to your big bodies. But yeah, so why the blockers? They're good. They're good when they're in first hand because you can ramp them with leader effect, which is true. I think these cards are great in Robin. I just personally don't use them. Sol is a great offense and blocker, despite not having counter. I've seen a lot of East Robin players play with the Sol and swing with the Sol, which I think is super. Those guys are cool. You could never catch me swinging my blockers like that, or especially in a deck like this. You can't catch me swinging my blockers like that. In like maybe Boa, like sure maybe, but not in Robin. But yeah, Sol being a 3/5 is pretty good. But being counterless is just very difficult because I know as a Robin player, I'm not going to have a lot of resources to counter with, so every card matters. And just having a counterless that has a chance to be a trigger blocker is a bit iffy for me. I would actually, if I were to run a trigger blocker, I would actually run Brule, just because she does have counters. So even if I need to counter with her, I can rely on that. With Sol, I can't do that. But then again, she's a 3-1, he's a 3-5. So this is why I went with 3 and 3. Having a trigger is great in the game. Yeah, having a trigger blocker is great in the game. That's true, especially in an aggro meta. In a slower meta, I'm assuming in the slower meta you could change this up, but MemoBunker, he's in an aggro meta, which these cards do make sense. So I agree with him there. Here's the big one. Here's the big one for me. Because one card I think is super unloved in this deck, and I think more Robin should play it, is Usohachi. Why Usohachi? Usohachi handles so many, like OP09, at least in the West, is very blocker reliant, right? You think your Vasco shots in a Blackbeard, you think of your Lucky Ruse and Shanks, your Boas and Dofi, and then just so many other decks. Black Yellow Luffy, which is actually the deck we're going to cover, that has Sabos. So many decks in the meta right now rely on blockers to sort of stall the game for them. So that's why I think Usohachi is super vital in this list, especially when you're sort of strapped for resources. I'm not a fan of Sanji just because, yes, technically he does have the same effect as Usohachi, plus he's Rush, but then you are committing 7 Dawn, right? And let's say they have 2 blockers, right? You can only rest 1 blocker for 7 Dawn. I can rest 2 blockers with Usohachi for 6 Dawn, so there's that value there. Usohachi is a card that I tried, but I decided to get rid of it since there was no trigger. Again, that's fair. You want a lot of triggers in the deck to ramp off the leader effect, so that does make sense. I agree with him there. I want for all the 2Ks to have a trigger to make the best of the leader's ability. Bedge, Frankie, and Olivia. Makes sense, I agree there. Sanji, 7 cost Sanji is more functional. Another attack. Again, that's like in a meta that's very aggro, I can understand where he's coming from this. Just because he wants to focus more of his resources on handling the board and controlling the board until the late game. 7 cost Sanji is more functional, another attack, and is better for situations. Exactly, like again with the 6-drop, sorry, not 6-drop, your Boas, your Dofis, your Rebecca's, your Sabos, your Lucky Ruse, etc. Like your Sanji will take care of that, and likely he could swing into that as well. I think, me personally, I think Sanji is good for controlling tempo. I don't think he's good for ending game, and because the reason why I think he's a bad option for ending game is because that's 7 Dawn you're committing. Like that 7 Dawn could be invested into like a 10k rush, whether it be 9 Luffy or Ace, or you could use it to boost your leader up by 7k. Like I personally think 7, that's an expensive card. It's good in certain situations, which is why I run 2 instead of 3. But again, like my meta is different than his. His is more aggro, so seeing this card more often is more value for him as well, just because he can control the board much better. Okay, yeah, so those are all the questions. I'm gonna go to the game that was streamed, the Black Yellow Luffy versus Robin matchup, and we're gonna review 2 games. The first game he loses, unfortunately, and then the second game he wins. So we're gonna just look at that, see what happened. I think he played those games as perfect as he could. And then especially game 3, again, 3 geckos is pretty rough. 3 geckos and 2 sabos. And then after that, I'm going to actually post my version of this list. Just knowing that the focus is handling an aggro board. Honestly, my list, if I were to make this list myself, it wouldn't look much different from this. So we'll see that at the end of the video. So yeah, let's go watch the matchup. Sorry about that. Actually, I forgot one of my other notes. So I actually do have a lot of notes for the Black Yellow Luffy matchup. I was watching MemoBunker's games, and I thought of a few notes, also from personal experience. So this is sort of my guideline in the Black Yellow Luffy matchup. I'll probably have it on the screen here, but I'm gonna read it off my phone. All in all, you want to play to your strengths. What are Robin's strengths? It's 1, draining people of resources. You're basically controlling what's in the hand, which is funny because of her Delver Fruit. And also you're ramping, right? So your ultimate goal is to flood the board with these big bodies. And in doing that, in banishing and playing out big bodies, you're essentially draining their hands so that they don't have any form of defense when these bodies come out on the board. And in your endgame, you could probably do a lot of swings, and they probably won't have as much counter as they would have liked. Decks with very like with big hands, like they will get a huge hit from this just because, you know, they're not getting the resource from life. Because what I actually noticed, sorry, personal experience, so I'm gonna go off on the tangent here. I was actually playing a friend versus Lucci. He told me that like Lucci is 50-50 into Robin, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? But what I noticed, and I actually kind of believe him now, because like he's a very experienced Lucci player. I think he does like actual tournaments and, you know, Nats and stuff like that. So I was actually surprised when I beat him. But what I noticed is that, you know, his hand style is pretty small. And you know, that's natural with Robin, but he didn't have the cards he wanted. And that sort of made me realize that like, oh yeah, a lot of players are reliant on what's in their life to see what they got. Because I know one of the sort of big rules of One Piece is to like be okay with taking a life, because that's a resource that you can have, right? And just negating that resource is so powerful with Robin. So again, you want to play with that in mind. People are also reliant on getting resources from their life, and you're essentially negating that from them, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, number 2, and this is sort of implied with Robin. Play out your big bodies as soon as possible, because you want to force out the Raigos, especially in the Black Yellow Luffy matchup. I think they're starting to tech in Raigo just because of Shanks and Blackbeard. What your advantage versus Black Yellow Luffy is that you get to your 9-10 Dawn much faster than they do. If you force them to Raigo like a Yamato and Ace early in the game, that's Raigo 6 Dawn, right? So they're using like most of their Dawn to just get rid of that body. You want them to sort of get rid of all their Raigos as soon as possible, just so you can focus on building your board as much as possible to swing for endgame. Okay, rule number 3. Nico, Olivia, and Usohachi are very important cards in that specific matchup. Usohachi, as I said before, it can rest the Sabos. And again, with the Sanji, yes, it's a rush, but it is 7 Dawn to rush and rest. Whereas Usohachi is only... The only rule for Usohachi is that you have to have 8 or more Dawn, and then you can rest a 5 cost or less. Which is very powerful, because you're almost always going to get 8+ Dawn with Robin. And the second card to save is Nico Olivia. Now, I do know I mentioned... Actually, I don't know. I might have mentioned in my previous Robin video that you want to trigger this card. And why would you want to trigger this card? It's a boost to leader, and it's a 2k. So why would you want to trigger it? To me, you only want to trigger this card if you're looking for certain cards. And the only cards you should be looking for with Olivia is your top end or your counter events. Anything else, I don't think it's viable to trigger Olivia for. And especially in this matchup, because again, Luffy's probably going to be at 7 or 9k for most of the end game, right? So your Dawn allocation becomes so important. And having a 1 Dawn plus 3k is so powerful in that, because it just messes up with their math, right? Like, let's say you swing through your entire board and then you only have 1 Dawn left, and then they're probably like, okay, I'm probably safe here, because like, you know, that 1 Dawn is probably for Gum Giants, right? But then you just play Olivia plus 3k, you're swinging like 8 into 7 or 8 into 5 or 8 into whatever, 8 plus 10 into whatever, I don't know. But just having that plus 3k off of 1 Dawn, that's so efficient. I think that's the most efficient leader boost card in the entire game. Don't quote me on that. But Nico Olivia is very valuable in this matchup. I think MemoBunker actually won game 2 with it, so that's pretty good. So those are cards that I think are pretty vital in this matchup specifically. And the last rule I want to say is keep them at 2 life. And I know this is sort of like a general rule for everybody. Like, everyone's rule for Black Yellow Luffy is don't swing, don't swing, don't swing. Or, sorry, no, that's a no. I think the rule for Black Yellow Luffy is like keep them at 2 life. Because you want them to use their resources, their Dawn, to get rid of their life so they can start using leader effect. And this is it sort of counters what Robin wants to do, because Robin wants to swing to ramp, right? But again, the banish is always threatening. But like again, the card is going to trash, so you know it's not like Black Yellow Luffy can't get that back. But you want to keep them at 2 life. So me personally, I would never play out 6 Robin, or at least use her effect, because if I'm a Black Yellow Luffy player, which I'm not, so I might be wrong here. You are free to roast me in the comments if I'm wrong, but just from knowing Black Yellow Luffy and knowing what he wants to do, like he wants to get to 0 life so he can start using leader effect. Not too fast, but he wants to get to 0 like when he wants to. So if you swing, they're probably likely going to take it whether it's banished or not. And if you play the 6 Robin, which you would do in most matchups, so in most matchups you swing into leader with Robin, and then the next turn you play Robin on 6, and then you swing again, right? But if you do that and the Black Yellow Luffy takes all 3 of those lives, he's so close to leader effect, and he's so close to that cycle. So I'd say keep him at 2, whether that be a mix of not swinging and just playing Robin and swinging, or swinging, not playing Robin, playing like a blocker, maybe 2 blockers instead, and swinging again. Whatever that combination might be, just try and keep him at 2 life, just because that's sort of your sweet spot. Because he can't flampe, he can't use the like the Supernova Luffy. I don't know what people are calling that card, like that 5-drop. It's not the Egghead Luffy, it's the Punch Man Luffy. But yeah, people could use that card to get to 0 life. You want them to use their own resources to get to 0 life, so you want to sort of starve them out at 2 life. Which, again, you want to swing with Nico Robin, leader, 2 rounds. So what I would recommend is just to swing into leader twice, so you can ramp twice, and then just play out your big bodies, flood the board, and then go for endgame. That would be my advice. I could be wrong. Again, I'm not a pro. I don't do these events. I'm just a filthy casual. My channel is called Off Meta for a reason. Yeah, that's my advice for Robin, or at least that's how I would play against Black Yellow Luffy. So now that we've covered that, now let's go to the matchup. Okay, so let's get into the game just now. I think I'm watching this at ×2 speed just because it's pretty long. It's a best of 3. Okay, so it looks like the Robin opted to go second, which I would always say Robin always wants to go second just so she can get that early ramp and she gets to 9 Dawn faster, which is when she starts to play out big bodies. So here MemoBunker. Yeah, so here MemoBunker, he's just gonna do a weak swing. I don't think he cares if he swings high. Me personally, I would swing high, just because I want to guarantee that hit. But in this specific matchup, you kind of are okay if they don't take the hit, just because again, that's less resources in the hand. That card, like if he did opt to counter out, that card could have been like a baby Sabo or Luffy, or it could be a Sabo or Luffy. So that's just less plays he has, and we want to, it's less plays from hand, so he has to play it off. He has to depend on leader effect to actually play that card. So you know there is value in swinging low there and just for the ramp. 3 Dawn here. I think this would be a rare case where you just play out the blocker, the Brûlé or the Sol. That would be a very good move here in my opinion, which is actually a great reason to have that in the deck, just for these sort of awkward plays when you're not necessarily using all your Dawn and you just have a bunch of random Dawn up. I also think that the EBO2 event could be used here, like when you don't want to use all your Dawn. But that's here or there. Weak swing 5 into lead, he takes the life banish. It's a Sabo. That's a good sign. Sorry, it's a good sign for early game. It's not a good sign for end game because again, he's just gonna keep cycling that. So here's a move I'm not sure about. I know some Robins do this. They trigger the Frankie even though it's not last life. Me personally, so the reason why people would trigger this Frankie is for the draw, of course. But you don't get to play it. What I'd rather do, like, because I have other ways to filter through the deck, whether it be the Olivia trigger, whether it be Yamato or Luffy. All those cards sort of fish through your deck. So I'm not necessarily keen on using the 2K Frankie as a counter, sorry, as a trigger. Some people are. I'm not gonna blame you, because with Robin, you have no way to actually search out your top end. So there is value in triggering cards that help you fish through your deck. So that's also something else you want to keep in mind when playing Robin. So he's just explaining the trigger. He has more than 2 life, so he has more than 1 life, so he just draws. He doesn't get to play. And here's why. Because like he takes the first swing with leader, and then we don't know what he drew. Unfortunately, we can't see what his hand is. But let's say it was a non-counter. Like let's say it was one of the top end, which is pretty good. He lost 2Ks this early in the game because he had to invest one in the GARP. So pretty rough. Me personally, I prefer to keep the Frankie. Some opt to use it just to, again, go through their deck. I'm not gonna blame for either. Here's a strange play, because he plays out the 6 Robin first. What I would personally do is I would actually swing Robin here first, right? Because what happens here, let's say he takes it. He's a step closer to leader ability, and like yeah, you could argue that he's not ready to use leader ability, but like still, like they want to hold themselves at like 1 life. Like 1 life is the best life to hold them at, just because they are now ready to actually use leader effect, whether it be through the Punch Luffy or Flampe or any card that lets them discard their last life. Plus, like even if he's at 1 life, yes, that's scary, but then he could, like he's at his 6 down turn, he's likely gonna salvo here. I think he does salvo. Yeah, he has the salvo in hand. He likely salvos because we are at 9 dawn. We did ramp off of that initial swing. So what's it called? Yamato actually cannot KO anything just because the salvo protects it. So again, this is also why I would probably opt to swing leader first and then play the Robin. It's sort of like a check. Because right now you don't want to hit him at all, because there are cards that can speed himself to 0 life, so leader ability is active. The 1 swing, so the 5 Robin swing. Again, I'm not claiming to know everything. I'm just a filthy casual. To me, the 5K swing is a little weird, just because he could take life here. And then he's just closer to leader ability. He's also getting to his 8 dawn turn, which he could do a lot of nutty plays. I don't think he geckos there, but like he could probably do like this is why I don't play Black Yellow Luffy. I can't like, I don't know the path. I probably could play it if I put the time to learn it, but right now I haven't. I just know from watching other people play. I don't know the route itself, but I know 8 dawn Black Yellow Luffy players, they do some spicy stuff there. And I think this chat over here, I think he does something awesome. He plays Ivankov. I think he trashed the life and then you play a 5 cost up there, like of the 3 brothers. I think it's the Luffy. So then he evolves the Luffy, and then he uses the Luffy effect, and now his leader ability is active. He's not going to be able to play out any babies, just because he only has 3 dawn left, which is fine. He's a 7K leader. So he could prep. He could realistically prep for the next turn. So he just does a big swing. Here's a weird trigger for me. The Olivia. So again, we don't know what his hand is, so he could probably not have any healing cards in his hand. But if he does have a Yamato in hand, I would hold on to this, just because it's so good during late game, especially when the Luffy's hand is starting to wear thin, but he's a 9K. Just because now you've lost a 2K and the +3 onto lead. A little questionable to me, unless he didn't have the healing card in hand. That's the only time I would think about using it like that. Just because he plays a Yamato here, he pops Ivankov, and then he heals. If he didn't have that Yamato in hand, then yeah, sure, like trigger the Olivia. But if he did, like if he had a Yamato or an Ace, then I would keep that Olivia in hand, me personally. So he's going to use 5 Luffy's ability, plus 2K, trash life, and draw a card. He's going to evolve the other one. Yep. So I think what he did is he Raigo'd. I believe he Raigo'd the Yamato because he was at 1 life, so he doesn't need to trash any life. And then he played out the Egg Luffy to pop the blocker. and now we're sort of open, kind of rough. So he has 2 swings in here, and AK. This one, if you have Gum Giants, one thing I like to do with Robin is I would always keep 1-Don up just in case. Just in case either my life is the Gum Giants. So I think a good play you could do with Robin, and this is what I do all the time, is just leave 1-Don up. Leave it all the time. Like, even if you're swinging weaker, leaving 1-Don up just plays that bluff so well. Because Gum Giant's such a powerful event. Like, they're probably gonna assume that you have it anyways, even if you don't. Also, like, there is the off chance, like, even if you don't have it, like, there is the off chance that Gum Giant is in your life, right? So you want to save that 1-Don for that event that could probably save you. So you're just preparing yourself for luck, you know. So here he's gonna use the Gum Giant event, plus 4K, so he gets out of the 8K swing, and then he just does a big swing with leader. There you go. He takes the left. There you go. Blocker. Perfect. Nice. Again, this is why the blockers are so valuable in this deck. You know, you might just get it, and like, yes, there is some luck in it. And also, look at the Black Yellow Luffy's hand. There's only 3 cards in his hand, so not all that much. So there's an up and down to this. Like, he does have very little cards, which is great as a Robin player. But then in the preference for Black Yellow Luffy, Sabo does a lot. He's going to be cycling Sabos soon, just because that's what they do, and they're going to be filtered in their hand. So I think when you get to, like, after they play a couple of Sabo plays, like, you're going to have to start to assume that their entire hand is 2Ks. Or it's their entire hand is 2Ks and then they have 1 Gecko. So he's going to play out the Yamato. Heal life, pop a guard, that's fine, whatever. This, I think, is where it starts to get rough. He plays the Sabo, he plays the Luffy targets the Sol. 100% he targets the Sol. There you go, pop. And then here, I think you 100% play a second Sabo, yeah. Right here. And he filters. So wow, he filtered out a lot of Black Yellow Luffy players play Kuzan. I think it's a pretty spicy hand in the deck. Here's another strange situation. Like, he triggers the Olivia again. I'm not sure about that. Like, I think at this point in the game, like, you have to go for game. Like, I know it's difficult to go for game, but like, it's either you win this turn or they win next turn. That's how I'm looking at this board. And this is where the Usahachis come in so clutch. Like, they come in so clutch because, like, again, we trashed 2. He trashed 2 Olivias. So that's a whole 5+. That's 11K. That's an 11K swing for 2-Don that he could have had. Honestly, if he had Usahachi, like, I think he plays Sanji this turn. Let's see what he does. Like, if you had Usahachi, you could rest one of the Sabos. And then you have a 9K swing. So he either blocks or just burns a counter. I don't know. I just feel like having the having an Usahachi and having 2 Olivias could have sealed you the game here. So we go into Luffy. He blocks it out. That makes sense. He's gonna cycle it anyways. He plays out the ace. Go into Luffy. Okay, so he swings 9 into leader of Gecko. Obviously you have to counter out, or else he just alls in. He goes on Luffy. He pumps him up. Okay, so we're gonna do a big ass swing here. I think that's 11K. He takes it. It's a bedge. Pretty funny. but you know, good shit on the Black Yellow Luffy player to not preemptively play out any other cards or to swing too high, because that bedge could have won. It could have won MemoBunker the game if he preemptively uses it down. So very good. Again, these are pro players. I'm not a pro player. I know people on my locals who would just do the play preemptively, but or just swing too high and then just get wrecked by Rage. So good on him. Because he has the extra Dawn up, now he's able to use leader effect, and now he's a 9K body with a block round board. Again, he only has 3 cards in hand, and at this point, me personally, if I was in MemoBunker's shoes, I would assume all those cards are 2Ks. Because we're at a point in the game where it's either... The bedge kind of stalled the game, so now we're sort of repeating the last turn where it's either I win this turn or you win next turn. So, again, Usahachi would be so good in this situation. Like, that card is so good in this matchup. Instead he plays the Sanji. So what was this game? Yeah, so he rests the Sanji. Swing into Sanji, whatever. And then he goes, I believe 10 at lead. Oh, 11 at lead. He has two, I think he has two Flampeys in hand. Let's see. Okay, that was too fast, but I'm assuming he has two Flampeys in hand. He knows he's safe here, so he just takes the life and then he just solves it. Yeah, two Flampeys and that's game. Again, like, if he had two Olivias in hand, that's only 2 Dawn, and then you could swing 12, and then I think he only had 2 Flampeys and then like a baby in hand, so like that would be like perfect. But yeah, like again, this is pretty rough. This is pretty rough late game. All of this was on the bench, and then the Black Yellow Luffy player reacting. Like again, the bench was complete luck. Like honestly, the Black Yellow Luffy player won the previous turn, but the bench kind of just stalled it out. But again, like good on the Black Yellow Luffy player for not swinging too high, because that bench could have destroyed him. But yeah, so the Black Yellow Luffy player wins game 1. Kind of rough. Okay, game 2. Okay, so it looks like Robin opted to go first again. So he attacks to get a blocker off of life. That's pretty funny. Then he has the Kuzan. Kuzan's really good just because he's going to be playing out Yamato's relatively soon, and that Kuzan would be awesome. So he's going to play the Robin, trash life. He's at 2. We want to stall him at 2. Last game, I think he played it pretty well, just because the Black Yellow Luffy player was in a situation where he had very little cards in hand, and that's what we want to see. It was just unfortunate that, you know, he had the cards to sort of survive till late game. But that's here or there. Anyway, so he's going to play out the Luffy to pop the Robin. That's fine. We spend our time just popping their board. Honestly, here's another weird decision to me. So he turns his Saul sideways to kill the Kuzan, and then he swings into leader. Getting leader to 1 life is, again, I'm not sure how this matchup goes entirely, but I wouldn't want to get my Black Yellow Luffy player into 1 life. And on top of that, he plays the Yamato. So like in my head, you could have just played the Yamato and then swing and then keep the Saul up, just in case. Like there is the concern that he does get popped and you don't get value out of him, but you're already playing the Yamato. So to me that makes sense. Or to me that route makes a little more sense. It could be tournament nerves, you know. I think I'm not gonna speak for him, but you know, tournament nerves are always going to be a thing in these kind of matchups, especially for a lot of players who, you know, a lot of these other players that you don't necessarily always see on stream. Like tournament nerves are always going to be a thing, so you just have to keep that in mind. Let's not call everyone bad at the game just because they did something wrong. You know, keep in mind that tournament nerves are always going to be a thing. So he plays out the Hiyori to basically swap his life to get the Egghead Luffy into life, and then he just pops the Saul. So either way, that Saul was dying. He used leader effect here to get 2 life, and then he just, I believe, swings 8k into lead. That's the only, oh sorry, not 8k, 10k. He gets another blocker, awesome. So another blocker Black Yellow Luffy has to deal with. So he's at 7k. No blockers. So yeah, he's going to want to counter out just because that gets cards into his trash to use for his effect, and it sort of protects the life from getting bottom decked. And now he's at 10 Dawn. He Raigos the ace, which that's fair. He Raigos the ace, and then he's gonna pop the blocker. That's fine. He's at 9. He used leader effect and dumped the search. Then he swings 9 to leader. That's fine. How many cards does he have? It looks like he only has 3 cards again. 3 or 4 cards. Again, good position to be in as a Robin player, just because now we're at a position where we're sort of winning like a taller tempo. Like he doesn't want to dump his hand just because he doesn't have a Gecko in hand. He likely doesn't have a Gecko in hand. So he doesn't want to dump his hand because that is his future play. So let's see what he does. He Raigos the Yamato, that's fine. We have Gadatsu on board in case he gets 2 life. There you go, he plays a Sabo. There you go. Now he has a blocker and he's swinging 8k, sorry, not 8k, 9k into lead. Gum Giant, fair. He draws 2 and 1 counter. 1 more, Onami, that's fine. Okay. Kind of a okay position. We're both at 1 life. The issue is he is a 7k, but like that's easily, you can easily get over that with an Olivia. I would say Sanji's also a good choice here too, just because his hand size is pretty low. He blocks. There you go. Yeah. He wants to keep his blocker in trash just in case it gets rested. 7 came to lead. Okay, so that Luffy's gone. Let's see what he does. So he plays the Frankie. He plays the Frankie, which is a little weird to me just because it gets popped by Egg Luffy. I'm not sure if he has any more Egg Luffys in trash. But I'm sure he does. I think I saw more than those two, than that Egg Luffy. So that Frankie might just end up getting popped if he has stuff to pop it. He has a Gecko. Leader effect Salvo Blocker. He's a 7k leader, and then he just swings a 9k again. Probably a Gadatsu. Or maybe I lead. Actually, I wouldn't blame him either. I would still swing on Gadatsu just because it's an extra swing. I will say I kept watching this matchup, and the Black Yellow Luffy player, he kind of looks like a Magnus Carlsen, I think is his name, like the really good chess player. I don't know why. That's awesome. Well, either way, yeah, you use Gum Giant. Like either way, you use Gum Giants. Like either to protect the Gadatsu or just to protect your leader. And I guess he trashed another Gadatsu to for the extra monkey counter, so he probably swung a leader. He only owes one card. That's pretty good news. Yeah, that's a Sanji play. 100% Sanji play. It is risky, but the Sanji play is... Yeah, he does have two blockers. The Sanji play is a little risque. Again, another situation I'd prefer to have Usachi in, just because you have more Dawn to play with. But it doesn't matter because he ends up using Nico Olivia, swinging 9k to lead, and yeah, that's game 2. That's why I'm saying Nico Olivia is super good in this matchup, because it's just out of nowhere the Olivia to win, because he's counting your Dawn here, right? So the reason why, if he knows you have an Olivia in hand, he never takes this. He just counters out of this because he's a 7k lead. He's swinging 7. He's like, yeah, you know what? Like, if you have game here, then I'm just going to counter out, because you could swing bigger with whatever wild card you have. But he only sees that you have 2 Dawn, so he sees that your highest swing is 7k, whether it be with Frankie or with Nico Robin. So this is why the Olivia is so good, because it's 1 Dawn for 3k and then just 1 more for 9k. Right? He's 7k. That 1 extra Dawn gives you 9, and then he can't counter out. It's fucking amazing. It's awesome. Like, unfortunately, this Black Yellow Luffy player, he just gets 3 Geckos the next round, and pretty rough. It's pretty rough. But those are the first 2 matches I want to cover. Okay, so here is the list that MemoBunker had. It's a pretty good list. It's a solid list in general. I like the list, but I did mention that I would make a few changes to this list, and I'll explain the changes I would personally make, just based on my experience and my local meta. I would take away 2 aces and add in a Rush Luffy and a Katakuri. Katakuri works a lot better with Gum Giants. It also helps remove their board, so it kind of does the ace and Lin thing, the 9 Lin thing as well. 9 Luffy is also a great option in my opinion, just because it's a rush. Even though you're not healing, you are turning it sideways. So in that vein, it's actually kind of like a taunt, right? Because they either dump all their resources to take care of the Luffy, they do their own. So I think it's a good distraction to have on board. Same thing with Ace, but I'd rather keep Ace standing and just take the heal. Other things I would change, again, I mentioned that I would take out the Sols and just have a full playset of Brule. To me, Sol and Brule are the same thing. Either way, I'm not swinging with my blockers in this deck at least, just because you're already losing cards as resource to counter out with. So I want to keep my blockers up just to have that layer of defense just in case. The trigger is pretty good, so that's why we're running 4 of these blockers. I actually, surprisingly, I agree with the 6 Robin only being put down to 3. Again, you're not really using this card aside from 1 turn. It's not something you want to fill your deck with all that much. We're still running for Gadatsu to handle that aggro board. I think a Katakuri also handles aggro board as well. Now we have cards like Sanji, Katakuri, Yamato, Gadatsu, and Egnami to handle that sort of aggro and to control that. We also have cards to heal. Katakuri, Ace, and Yamato. One of my favorite combos. I'm not sure if I said this before. I know I've told it to people on my locals, but one of my favorite combos, like of all time with this deck, is something I don't think people have thought of this. So let's say you have Let's say if you have 9 Luffy on board, that's cool. Let's say they don't kill it, it survives. It'll likely survive unless they have a hard removal. So what you could do is you could put Banish, Eggnami Banish onto Luffy, or you could do Olivia, Olivia to boost yourself by 3, and then swing either a 10k Banish or an 8k Banish with Olivia, and then just category that into your left. Why these two cards in general? First of all, they're low enough for you to combo with category. Onami if you want to be a little more aggressive with Luffy, and Olivia if you still need to look for your top end card. It also works with Gum Giant as well, so that's a really great option for you. You're getting a filter with this and then a filter with this, or you're popping any 5 cost on the board. That's really good to category that into your own life. And also, because you have more life, like that stalls you a little more for your top end. My issue with MemoBunker's deck as well is because there's not that much top end. I think his top end, there's only 8 top end. I don't consider Sanji as top end just because I don't think 7k power is all too scary. I think 9k and 10k is your sweet spot for top end. Obviously you have your 12ks, but that's a different story. Y'all's not gonna get that. My list has a bit more top end. Again, more favorable in a slower meta just because you need time to get these cards and to play the cards. Whereas in MemoBunker's deck, it is more aggro focused. You're focused on the mid game a little more with Sanji, Gadatsu, and Nami, and I guess Robin. Like these cards are sort of your mid game. This other deck I have here is the top end. It's more of a top end deck. If your only top end is only these 2 cards, you're sort of stuck like a 1-lane game plan. Whereas this is a little more flexible. But yeah, still, you have more options for your top end. Yes, there is less of it. Honestly, I would take out Gadatsu's if you want to add more top end, but that's already kind of risky because we are not running the 0 drop event. I took that out as well because I think Gum Giant is good enough. Because with these cards, with Yamato, Katakuri, and Luffy, like you're going to have a Dawn Up for this event anyways, so you're not as concerned about not having that 0 drop event because Gum Giants, all of these non-counter cards become the counter, so it kind of works itself out there. Obviously the only time you're not going to be able to use it is Ace, which is why I always say heal with Ace because you're not going to be able to use this event. You get an extra life, your Ace stays standing, so you're protecting your board and you're getting more resources in your hand for your end. So those are the changes I would make to the deck, but still, again, I will say I did not make top 32. That was MemoBunker. He's the specialist. He's the Chad who took our girl Nico Robin all the way to top 32 Latin America. So big props to him. You know, doing the holy work. You know, just bring our girl on the big screen. I remember like I was in a Discord with people and we were all like, "Yo, Robin's in top 32." It was pretty great. It's pretty great. Keep doing your stuff, MemoBunker. We're all rooting for you here. That's gonna be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much, I guess, for watching the video. I've never really done a nationals like analysis like this, just because Robin hasn't really been played. But I mean, I guess let me know if you guys like this style of content as well. I want to try and do more things. I do have a plan to do like IRL matches, but I just need to find like a good tripod. But that's here or there. I'm still waiting for the sim to update just because I really want to try out Blue Yellow Ace just because he gets a great card. Obviously he's not on the sim right now, so I can't show you, but he gets a great card and I want to try him out. He's also a really fun deck. I've been solo testing him with some friends at my locals. Oh yeah, I also added Usohachi because again, it's a 2K and it's super clutch. Like you saw, like it could have been so clutch in that Black Yellow Luffy matchup, but unfortunately it wasn't in the deck. I personally think this card is too good to not include in the deck because if you have 8 or more Dawn, US to 5 cost or less, that's most of your blockers. Like the only blockers this doesn't cover is Mihawk, Sanji, and Blackbeard. It rests everything else. And you're always gonna have more than 8 Dawn just because you're ramping. I think this card is awesome, even if it doesn't have counter. That's my deck list. That's my interpretation of the top 32 Robin deck. I want to give a big thanks to MemoBunker and Madwolf for answering my questions. It really gave me a lot of insight to how other people are approaching the deck, because an issue with Robin is that not a lot of people are playing with her, so I oftentimes like sort of get into my own little bubble of saying like, okay, this is the only way to play Robin. No, there's other ways to play Robin, and like people like MemoBunker, bringing other decks of Robin into good light. Like this is a good deck. Like his deck is very good. Like again, it brought him to top 32. I can't say that about myself, but like this deck is good. Like it covers a lot of matches. Would I play this deck? I would play it with little changes, and these are the little changes. But I think his approach to Robin is very good. I think there's a lot of good Robin decks out there. It's just a lot of people aren't playing them just because she's not meta. But that's why we're here. We're an off meta channel. So yeah, I think that's a good way to end it off. Guys, if you like the content here, please leave a like and subscribe. If you have any comments, or if you want to roast me in the comments, feel free to do so. You know, I'm sure I said a bunch of stuff that are wrong, and it's your job to point me out on that. Okay, on that note, Happy New Year, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.